Hello stationery fans. Today I'll be talking about the new A5 notebook that I recently acquired, as well as some of the inks that I've recently inked up in preparation for the spring season that has finally, I think, arrived, and a couple of other things that I am currently taking a look at. Recently I talked about how I was just about to use up my A5 notebook that I was currently using. That was the Nebula notebook, which had Tomoe paper, 52-gram paper, and I was really resonating with the fact that that was my first experience with Tomoe paper, and I loved it. I thought it was a really good form factor, and I also just love the characteristics of the ink that that particular paper was bringing out. And in that video, I was talking about, or I was asking the audience for what I should purchase next. Thank you so much for all the feedback and the comments. There was some incredible suggestions in there. In fact, every single suggestion and comment there was a really good suggestion. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I was trying to figure out how to stick within a particular budget. Again, if you're anything like me, you tend to spend money on your stationery items. And you think it's little bits, but they quickly add up and you realize, holy cow, I've spent more than I had anticipated. So this year, one of the things that I've been really focused on is just making sure I am very methodical about where I'm spending my money. A lot of your suggestions were of products that I can't get here readily in Canada, and some of the suggestions like the Galen Leather notebook, fantastic, gorgeous, and really ticked the box. Comes with a heavy import and shipping cost as well. So the cost of the notebook doubled, where I might be paying close to 60, 70, 80 Canadian dollars. Some of the products from the US, again, just because of the shipping cost, doubled or added a quarter onto the cost. And so in almost every case, I was looking at a 50 Canadian dollar plus notebook, which compared to my typical go-to, which is the Midori MD notebook, I thought was a little bit more on the extreme side of where I wanted to go with my budget just now. So again, what I ended up doing was looking on the internet for a couple of different options, and I don't normally do this. I went on Amazon just because I thought I would take a look at what was being offered out there. And I was very happy to discover a notebook for 30 Canadian dollars. Not that I'm a big supporter of this. I love Amazon for a lot of things. I also don't like it for a lot of things. I ended up picking up a notebook. I'm just pulling this out of my Popov notebook cover here. I ended up picking up a 30 Canadian dollar notebook. It's a no-name brand. If I were to look on the back of this notebook, there is a Pluma paper Pluma. So I'm not even sure if that is a real brand out there. But the reason I picked this was for a couple of reasons. One, the cost, as I mentioned. The other one that a lot of you folks have offered in terms of suggestions didn't quite fit the bill for me in terms of blank paper. I love a good blank A5 notebook because that's how I like to be creative and expressive. I use a writing guide on the back of the sheet of the paper so I can match lines, but I also pull that out when I want to freestyle and draw and do other things with it. Sometimes I just go ahead and use the notebook without the writing guide behind it, the spacing guide, for line heights, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about there. And I just like the look of blank. There are, again, lots of good suggestions. There were quite a few offerings on dot variations, grid variations. For me personally, aesthetically, and for some reason, when I stare at a sheet of paper that has dots on it or grid patterns and varying subtleties of how prominent the grid pattern or dot is, I still can't seem to get beyond the fact that they are there. I just love the look of a blank page with my writing on it, and if I see dots or grid lines in the background, my I just gravitate towards focusing on the grid lines, and it becomes distracting for me in terms of the clash between my writing and the grid pattern and dots in the background. In my Hobonichi A6, obviously there is a distinct grid pattern behind. I don't care as much in there. In fact, if I could, if there was a preference, I would love if there was no dots or grid pattern in the Hobonichi A6 as my planner. However, I'm okay with it because the intent behind the planner is really to jot things down as quickly as possible in a functional way. Whereas my A5s I use for long form journaling, and long form journaling to me is that open creativity and that ability to explore and create on a blank canvas, which is why I like blank pages. So that's why I went with this. Cheap, relatively. Free shipping because of Amazon. Love or hate, depending on what your respective perspective is. And yeah, it was Tomoe paper. That was the other consideration in this. There's 192 sheets of Tomoe paper in this. It's a cream color. And unlike the 52 grams, this is a 68 gram notebook. So a little bit heavier on the Tomoe paper. Soft cover, cardboard, front and back. It comes with a ribbon marker, which I really like, and it's lay flat. So it's been really good. I've been really enjoying it. I stick this inside my pop-off leather A5, and it's become a really functional day-to-day. This isn't to say that I'm completely sold on this notebook. Again, I'm not typically supportive of buying things off of Amazon for stationery. That's just me personally. I love to support local stationery shops or mom and pop retailers. If that's your thing, I'm not trying to suggest that you're doing it wrong or you're doing it incorrectly. I think it's great. Whatever way you're getting your stationery, that's the important part. For me, and just my personal beliefs or visions or values, I guess, whatever you want to call it, I try to buy my notebooks from a retailer that's very much focused on stationery and is not having or is competing with the big box of Amazon or things like that. That's a bit of a weird diatribe in there, but yeah, I've been really enjoying my A5 notebook, and I think it's going to be fantastic. I'll try and do a closer up down the road. But as I was saying, as much as I was saying that I've been really enjoying it, I'm not completely sold for the Amazon reason. I might gravitate back towards my Midori A5 MD notebook, the blank version there. Yes, it's not Tomoe paper, or at least I don't think it is. I've never been able to quite find the spec of that particular notebook. Sometimes I think it's Tomoe, but given the fact that typically, at least with the inks that I use, when I'm using Tomoe paper, like in the Hobonichi A6, the Nebula notebook, and this latest one here, I get a lot more variation of characteristics showing through on the ink, whereas with the Midori A5, I don't. Certainly things like sheen seems like it's not as prominent in the Midori compared to the Tomoe paper. So I suspect it's different paper there, but if you know better, or if I'm completely just making stuff up, which perhaps a little bit of that is happening here, feel free to correct me in the comment section below. I'd love to know if you know what the Midori MD notebook paper is, if it is Tomoe or something else. I like the Midori just because it's $10 cheaper than this here. However, for cheap Tomoe offerings, I couldn't find a cheaper alternative out there, at least in my immediate Canadian backyard, that fit the metric of blank and within a certain budget there. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, again, Amazon ticked the box for me here. The other thing that I've been doing is re-inking my pens. I do this fairly often. Between January till now, I've probably re-inked my pens 2, maybe 3 times. But I generally pick, on a quarterly basis, matching up with the season, a set of color theme that I would like. And of course, spring finally being here, I know I talked about how there was a massive snowstorm in a couple videos ago. just recently, at least in the city that I live in. I think we're finally turning the corner, although we just had a massive snow dump a few days ago here as well. But it's drying out fast and the sun is out a lot more and things are melting a little bit quicker. So that being said, I decided to pick a spring ink collection, really very much focused on that. So we'll jump over to the desk and take a closer look at that. So as I mentioned, I decided to swatch up some inks that I've currently got inked in my fountain pen. I've been experimenting with the Hobonichi A6 this year and this transition of using this as my planner. I have historically used a weekly planner and I've switched to the daily, and some days I will say I have missed planning just because I don't necessarily sit down. But when that happens, as it did recently here, I took the opportunity to take that blank page since the day had passed and swatch, ink swatch some of my inks here. And this was courtesy of a friend of mine, Ramona, who showed me her swatch sample in her hobo. I'm not sure if she was using a Teco, but either way, I was very inspired by that and figured I would use that in my blank page as an inspiration. So here you go. These are the inks that I've got inked up right now for spring. So right off the bat here, I've got my Pilot TWSBI 580 in a fine nib, inked with Kujaku, which is a beautiful turquoise teal color. I really like that. I've always been a fan of the Konpeki ink by Iroshizuku. The Pilot line inks I generally think are just so incredible. They're very well behaved. I've got that Konpeki inked up in my Navaler Nautilus, which is a very wet writer, because I've modified I hated the nib that came with the Navalar here. It was really dry, didn't really write very well, and so I ended up getting a Goulet Pens number 6 medium nib and stuffed that in here, and it's been fantastic. It's been a really good switch and nib, which has made this pen all the more functional. I wanted to get a gold trim nib, just as I digress a little bit here. But I ended up getting a silver because that's all they had in stock. I might switch that out to gold just to match the bronze look of this beautiful pen. The next one here is the Sailor Shikori Yamadori in the Edison Beaumont Moonbreaker pen. I love this pen. It's been an anniversary. It was an anniversary gift for my wife. It's a daily driver for me, and I can't get enough of it. I like the darker blues in here, and you can tell I love my blues. Particularly the Yamadori, I think, is a nice match with the colorway of this pen. Then I've got the Roshizuku Tsukiyo in my Lamy 2000. That's my work pen right now, so I don't have that on me. But I love it in that. I love the dark blue black. Not so much of a black, more of a nice in-between. It's got a storm-like look. I would say the Tsukiyo, the Konpeki are my frequent go-tos, alongside the Mysterious Blue by Waterman there. The Mysterious Blue is a little bit more light, but I like the darker blues. So 4 blues right off the bat. And then I've got the Mont Blanc Amethyst Purple in my Coeco in a medium nib. This is by Brass Sport, which I keep on my traveler's notebook here. Love it. I think it's a rich, dark purple. Thing with purple inks is it can be too light or too dark, almost black, and I find this is the perfect in-between. Then I've got my trusted Red Dragon Diamine in my Pilot Vanishing Point. I love the Red Dragon. I keep the Pilot Vanishing Point in my Hobonichi A6. This nib I modified. It's an extra fine, which I didn't really like, and I had the Vancouver Pen Shop basically take a razor blade to the nib. Don't try this at home unless you want to. And she was really able to help me just modify the nib so it writes more like a fine or a fine medium or a medium fine, somewhere in there. I got the extra fine many years ago, thinking that I would like a really fine nib. However, it didn't work out for me, and if I were to do it all over again, I'd probably get a medium in the pilot here. But that's for another consideration. The Bainu, I've got the Tiger's Eye here inked up with the Ginger Chicken, which is a Wonder Pens exclusive from Dominant Industry. This is based on one of the cats there. It's a beautiful kind of orange clay, and I love the fact that because the Bainu is so wet, it gives a nice variation. The next one here is the Hiroshi Zuku Tsukushi. This is a beautiful brown in my Opus 88. I find it's just a perfect pairing in terms of the pen aesthetic matched with the ink here as well. The next one here is the Iroshizuku Hana Ikada, which is Cherry Blossom Pink. And I've got this in my first fountain pen as an adult. This was a gift from my wife on my 30th birthday. This is the Faber-Castell Ambition in Pear Wood. I've had issues with this pen, and the folks over at Reed Stationers were kind enough to take a look at it, send it over to Faber-Castell, and it turned out that the nib unit had been tweaked or destroyed or something. So they happily replaced it for me, and now it's a wonderful writer, and it doesn't dry out, which was the previous issue there, or have any railroading or hard stops. I've got this in a bold. I love this pen. The nib I swapped out to a bold. Originally this was in an extra fine, but as the years went on by, I gravitated towards a bold. In this, it's a number 5 nib, so it writes closer to a medium out of this pen in particular. But I love the Hana Ikada, which is that beautiful cherry blossom pink, and I think it matches very well up with the springtime seasonal change. And the last one, of course, speaking of spring, is Diamine Kelly Green. I love this green. It's not too light, not too dark. It's got a good amount of shading in it, characteristics of coming out of winter into spring. So I like that this summer green is starting to poke out. And I've got this inked up in my Esterbrook Estie. There is my spring ink collection. Really happy with what I've got going on, and I'm sure within a week's time or two I'll be changing this all up again. Other ongoings in my life right now, as I mentioned, spring being the focus and things starting to dry out and melt in my garden, both in the front yard and my backyard. I have very much decided this year that I'm going to try and grow most of my vegetables, herbs, and flowers all from seed. Mainly because I'm trying to save money. I can spend a lot of money at a garden center, and between my wife and I, of course, not just me, between what we both want in our garden and how we want our garden to look, we can spend a lot of money in a garden center. And so this year we've decided to try our hand at growing plants from seeds. I live in a particular gardening zone or climate that is not conducive to having a very long grow season. Our grow season typically is 95 to maybe 100 days. And this year we're already off to a very late start in terms of some of the frost hardy, cold resistant or cold hardy vegetables that we typically try and get into the ground in the tail end of March. It's now coming up into the second week of April. I think this will be the second week of April by the time I release this video or put this video up on the channel here. And that's a few weeks behind where we typically like to put some seeds into the ground. So the best alternative to trying to save money here is to try and grow some of your plants indoors and transplant them when they're ready into the ground. We really have a growing season of particularly June. So we wait till the last frost has passed, which is somewhere in the second week of May. And I suspect it's going to be that first week of May, maybe second week of May, somewhere in there this year. And then from the second half of May, June, July, August are really good growing seasons. And you're immediately into a very shortened fall season for us. Between August to the end of September, the temperatures drop rapidly here, then you're limited on what you can grow. So trying to take advantage of increasing the growing season, growing seeds, growing plants from seeds indoors. I went to the dollar store, picked up a whole bunch of seed trays and a whole bunch of seed packets. And so it became prudent this year to keep a gardening journal. And my wife and I, we've been talking about we have been working on our front yard and our backyard, and I think I've talked about this a few times. This has been a project over a course of 10 years of us trying to take what was basically your typical North American version of a lawn, which was just fully turfed, and really adding some aesthetics while taking the chunks of grass out and putting in garden beds, as well as flowering areas, but a functional aesthetic to just being outdoors as much as possible. So a lot of planning goes into that. One of the things I have done is picked up a B6 notebook. This is a Midori notebook. It's a slim. It's just a very small amount of pages. I think don't quote me on this, but if I were to guess, just staring at this, and I should know the spec, but I don't off the top of my head, 20 pages, something like that. And it doesn't come with the cover. This is a cardboard soft cover here. The notebook, I think, came in a pack of 3, was $11, and the notebook cover is $11 as well. Something like that. Both Canadian prices there. What I've done is I've started to list out my plants that I'm going to be buying, which ones I have bought. Started to take some notes on things like green beans and some of the characteristics. And so this year, what I'm really planning to do is just focus on documenting as much as possible. It's my first time growing plants from seeds at this scale, I should say. I used to, when I lived by myself, have grow lights in my kitchen, and there's a bit of a funny story where cops came over to my house one day because the neighbors, me being a single guy in my house, a very tiny house, thought I was up to growing different kinds of plants, and the cops were called over. They took a look at my house, which was very bright because I had a lot of grow lights going on at the time. And they came in and asked what I was growing. I invited them in, gave them a couple of cucumbers and cherry tomatoes and things like that for my yield, which we all had a good chuckle about it. It was somewhat of a success. I lived by myself. I had a lot more time to really dedicate it to that craft. These days, with a very busy lifestyle, my wife and I are just trying to, and less space. My previous house had a lot of space for the indoor growth, outdoor growth, as well as the fact that it was just the two of us when my wife did finally move in. But when we moved into this new house here, new being relative, this is a very old house for us, I guess, compared to. We've been here for a long time. Less space, more space being used up by the kids indoors, and so we've gotten really creative with, and less time, of course, as a result of that. More creative with what we want to grow, when we want to grow. And our go-to methodology was always buying from the garden center. I'd like to say that my wife and I are lazy gardeners in that respect. So we're really trying to be proactive this year. And I think a gardening journal is going to be really, really useful and key in order to do just that. I only use this because that's what I had as a spare notebook. I very much see myself using a traveler's notebook, my extra traveler's notebook there, putting a dot refill inside of that and using that primarily moving forward. But I'll use this for now, and like I said, it doesn't have very many sheets, so you'll be curious to see how quickly I use it. And then I'll probably switch over to my traveler's notebook while I'm out in the garden and gardening away. I'm curious what you use for your gardening journals out there. It's a very different environment. I'm not going to be whipping out my fountain pen necessarily. It's probably my pigment marker and a pencil, more than likely, attached to that traveler's notebook. But what do you use? Let me know in the comments section below. Take care. Have a wonderful day, week, month ahead. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and the kind words in the comments as always. And I hope you are enjoying spring wherever you are. Bye for now.